Okay.
Try to...
Aloha.
Hello, Nicolas. Good morning.
Hi, hello. Confirming the microphone works now.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Nicolas, LA.
Morning, Chris. Morning, LA.
So
Morning, Chris. Morning, Nicolas.
Mr. Chris, LA, Mr. Nicolas, and we
Still waiting for Harlan and
yes.
Bambang.
Yes. While we are waiting for the other speakers and the other participants, I would like to read some of the house rules here. For the participant, please change your display name into your name and followed by your organization name in the bracket. And then also, please put your microphone on mute while you are not speaking to the forum. You can start to use your microphone by raising your hand on the Q&A sessions. And then the moderators and or the host will address your name. Or another options during the Q&A, you can type your questions or your comments on the chat box. The chat box will be only directed to me as a host. I will be copy pasting your comments or your questions into the forum to be responded by the moderators or your the intended speakers.
Just one question. When it's our time to present, so we'll be given the option to share screen.
Yes.
Okay.
All the speakers and moderators have the access to share the screen.
Okay. Thank you.
So it is 10:31. So we give like another 4 minutes before we start.
Yes, please. We're still missing 2 of our panelists, and I would imagine that they will be joining momentarily.
Again, for the participant, please change your display name into your name followed by the name of your organizations in the bracket. Good morning and welcome, Ibu Adelina.
maybe we should start in about 1 minute at
Yes.
10:35, and just giving a heads up to my fellow panelists that we may have to shuffle the order a little bit, but I'm sure we can accommodate everybody, all panelists that are able to show up.
All right, then it's 10:35. Good morning. I am Meredith Mayani from the AHA Center, and welcome to the HELiX Focus Sessions today. Our session today is presented to you by the Pacific Disaster Center, PDC. We have here Mr. Chiesa from the PDC, Bapak Bambang Suryaputra from BNPB, Lawrence Dimailig from the AHA Center, Mr. Nicolas Bidault from the World Food Program, and Ms. Victoria Lee from PDC. This morning we will be talking about estimating and addressing needs, disaster-aware updated, monitoring assets and estimating impact and needs to improve response. I hope we will have fruitful discussions, and hopefully from these sessions also we can take lesson learned and recommendations for actors working on disaster management. So without further ado, Mr. Chris, the session is yours.
Thank you so much. Aloha to all of my colleagues and all of the participants and the fellow panelists. I appreciate everybody taking the time and putting in the effort to join us today. I think we've got a lot of really good information to share, and we'll make sure we leave time at the end of the presentation for you to ask questions and make sure that we get answers to those for you, and maybe be a little bit dialogue-like. My fellow panelists have been introduced, but let me just reintroduce them for those of you that have just joined. I'm going to start by sharing my screen so that we've got some reference. I trust that you're able to see my screen okay. Can I get confirmation? Okay.
Yes.
See some nodding heads, so great, thanks. So we're going to spend some time this morning sharing with you some of the innovations of DisasterAWARE, and specifically how that application, which is developed and hosted by PDC and used by many of our partners, including a number of you that are in the audience today, I'm sure, how we can use that to monitor impacts and assets and estimate impacts to those, and ultimately to improve the response effort. As was mentioned, we'll be joined by 4 panelists. I have not, now that I'm sharing my screen, I'm not able to see who has joined. It looked like Bambang had joined, but we're expecting Harlan Hale from USAID's Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance. Harlan is a regional advisor based in Bangkok. Joining us also is Nicolas Bidault from World Food Program. He's a senior regional monitoring and VAM advisor. VAM, if you are not familiar with that acronym, is Vulnerability Analysis and Mapping. Dimailig is going to join us as well, or has joined us from the AHA Center. He's the Assistant Director for Monitoring and Analysis. And as I noted, looked like just as I went into screen sharing mode, I saw Bambang. He's the head of BNPB's National Emergency Operations Center, or PUSDALOPS. I'm going to start the presentation by taking 15 or 20 minutes and just provide an overview of DisasterAWARE. I know that a number of you are familiar with it, so what I really want to do is focus on the new features. My apologies to those that may not be familiar with it. We'll do a quick treatment of it. Of course, if you have interest, you may contact us, contact me. My contact information is at the end of the presentation, but happy to make sure you are fully aware of DisasterAWARE. But we'll focus on the new features, and then would like our panelists to provide some regional perspectives and national perspectives in the case of Bambang on their use of DisasterAWARE and its information resources and analytical capabilities to support DRR, broadly speaking, in the ASEAN region, and in Bambang's case, nationally within Indonesia. And as I noted, we're going to leave a half hour or so at the end of the presentation. Very briefly, introducing Pacific Disaster Center. Our technology is pervasive in the region. We really have evolved into a global organization, but certainly had our roots and start in the Asia Pacific region and in Southeast Asia in particular. The technology is used for early warning and response. The data and modeling resources and analytic capabilities that you'll see are directly applicable for quantifying impacts, assessing and quantifying impacts. And we believe in partnerships, and it's a strong part of our operating procedures. We think working together produces a much better outcome. And so I'm so happy that so many of our partners are able to join us today on the panel and in the audience.
Chris, sorry, we can see your presentation mode rather than the full screen, if you could just change it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for letting me know. I don't know if I can. Let's see. Let me try doing something. I hope it doesn't backfire, but you'll lose me. But that's fine. Let me see if this. Are you able to see? No, that didn't work. Well, then let me improvise. Sorry. I'm not sure why it's in that mode on Zoom, but I guess what I'll do is get out of presentation mode, and I'll just have to sort of minimize this. Sorry. Hope that's a little better, a little easier to read. So DisasterAWARE, for those of you that haven't used it or even have used it, you may not be aware of the fact that it's used by tens of thousands of disaster managers, really globally. We've got users in more than 70 countries, many of them using it operationally in the National Disaster Management Organization or in international organizations or NGOs. We also have more than 2 million public users, users of our mobile application. It's called Disaster Alert. Again, maybe some of you have used that. It's available on all major platforms, tablets and mobile phones, Apple or iOS and Android. It's hosted in the cloud and it's scalable, so it's monitored and operationally available 24/7. It's been used many times to help coordinate response activities and recovery activities. It's supported by more than 6,000, data layers, and we'll get a chance to see some of those today. Thank you, Victoria. So you cannot see my presentation. Let me, see if I can. Sorry about that. I didn't realize you weren't able to see the screen. Are you able to see this? Are you able to see it now? Maybe it's not in full presentation mode, but yeah, apologies.
We can see it. Yeah.
Okay. I'll just back up a slide. I won't repeat all the information, but that was a slide I was just briefing if you weren't able to see it. There's a lot of functionality, a lot of features in DisasterAWARE. It's not just about the hazard appearing, although that's certainly critical to its operation, but we've got information on population and infrastructure, observations. We have the ability to produce analytical reports, and there's a lot of ways for the users to share information that they're producing, whether it's analytical reports, sit reps, ground photos, data layers. So there's a lot of capability. We'll hit on some of the new features in the system, but I think in some cases you may not have even been aware of a capability that there is a lot of functionality in there. You may be familiar with DisasterAWARE as DMRS through the AHA Center, or ENAWARE, hosted by BNPB, soon to be released ThaiAWARE in Thailand's DDPM, and PhilAWARE, Philippines Office of Civil Defense, or you may be using PDC's hosted version called EMOPS, or again, the mobile application disaster alert. So there's a lot of different ways to interact with it. At the core, of course, it's all the same platform, and there's many of the same data sets and mostly the same functionality across the platform, but there's some unique data and some unique features in some cases for some of the systems. One of the key capabilities of DisasterAWARE is, in fact, the alerting capability, and that's probably used by most of its users, and you have the ability to select what type of hazards and at what severity you want to be notified and what geographic region. What's new, what I've highlighted here, is you're able to put in asset locations now, and they can be fixed locations or mobile. So if you're tracking vehicles or tracking response teams through GPS systems, you can include that location dynamically in DisasterAWARE, and it's like you've got a moving alert area around those assets. So it's really powerful in terms of being able to get alerts for assets spread out across the country or spread across the world in some cases. You can include in your assets things like lifelines and warehouses and shelters. Again, urban, search and rescue teams, transportation vehicles, partner locations, suppliers or providers, and gives you a lot of flexibility. Once you have that set up, you don't have to go in and change locations. The system is tracking them for you. Equally important, and especially on topic to today's workshop, is really about assessing the impacts and assessing the needs and doing it quickly and quantitatively and really repeatedly. And so I'm showing a few examples here, work that we've done with our partners, World Food Program and UN OCHA and the AHA Center, where we're able to lay down a footprint of a hazard or an impending hazard and get detailed information on the people and the critical infrastructure, the built environment, if you will, underneath that footprint. You can access that information through the web version, or as we're showing here, through the mobile version. Whatever information is generated is available through all of those platforms. So I want to just dig into that a little bit more deeply. One capability that's relatively new, is introduced about a year or so ago, so may not be familiar to all of our users, is something called the hazard brief. Every time there's a hazard, we generate really a timeline, a time series of hazard briefs, summaries for that hazard. As you know, the situation of the hazard can evolve over time. If it's a typhoon, of course, it may strengthen or weaken, it may change its course. Even an event like an earthquake, sometimes that magnitude of the earthquake gets adjusted over time as more seismic stations have reported. So we generate a timeline every time there's an update to that. This hazard brief, it's a graphical product. There's an example there on the left-hand side of the screen. It shows a map and some of the shaking intensity, in this case for an earthquake. Gives you a summary of how many people were potentially exposed to that, in this case over 1 million people, and a breakdown by age. It also has information on how much infrastructure or capital exposure, how much infrastructure, hospitals, schools, etc. It's powered by something called AIM, which is PDC's All Hazard Impact Model. It includes information from many of our partners and many of our activities. It's recently been upgraded to what we call AIM 3.0. It's taken a number of the data sets down to a 30 meter by 30 meter resolution globally. We were at 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer globally up until that point, which we thought was quite an undertaking. We've now made that up to 1,000 times better by bringing it down to 30 meters by 30 meters. Coming on the heels of that, really, launching within the next few weeks, is something we call Event Brief. It has a lot of the same core, certainly all the same data as Hazard Brief, but what it does is builds on that. So this top panel is really what we think of as Hazard Brief, or you might be familiar with as Hazard Brief, but it adds information like news feeds. It's dynamic, it's interactive, brings in news feeds, live cameras, traffic cameras where they're available, weather conditions, partner activities in the region. And I've got some mock-ups that I'll show you in just a second, but just pointing out, if you're used to using the system, when you put your cursor over the hazard icon, brings up a panel that has some different functions. One of the new functions very soon will be the Event Brief icon, and that's how you access it. So very, very easy to access it, and will look something like we're showing here and here, bringing in risk and vulnerability information, impacts to different types of lifelines and critical infrastructure. As I mentioned, traffic cameras, information on other activities going on in the region that are related to this. That could be DRR activities generally, or in the case of a large response, we'd certainly expect to augment that with active response information. So a lot of information, and easily access, and we hope easily interpreted information going into DisasterAWARE. So if you've been using DisasterAWARE for many years, thank you. Look forward to Event Brief. Check out asset tracking if you need to monitor and receive notifications for distributed networks of partners and warehouses and so forth. Be on the lookout for this Event Brief in the coming weeks. with that, and I know we kind of got off to a little bit of a late start, and I apologize for the technical delay on or technical challenges that I had. So I'm going to stop sharing. Let me ask if Harlan has joined us. Harlan, have you been able to?
Yes.
Okay, great. Would you like to share your screen, and hopefully you'll enjoy better results than I did in terms of sharing your screen if you've got a PowerPoint. If not, feel free to make remarks, Harlan.
To avoid the screen sharing problems, I don't have a screen.
Good
so
idea.
You'll just have to put up.
Yeah.
You'll have to put up with me. And I have to apologize. I got the scheduling kind of wrong, and I've overscheduled. So after my remarks, I'm going to have to sign off. I've got another thing I have to do. I'm very sorry about that. Apologize to the group. But let me say that, you know, first of all, there really is no such thing as a natural disaster. There are natural hazards, and these become disasters if we neither anticipate nor prepare for them. So using information, you know, is critical to anticipating and preparing for these hazard events that will require a response. Now, there are different kinds of hazard events, and each hazard event has different kinds of impacts. But there's some questions that, you know, basically you want to ask yourself, some information you need, you know, when an event occurs. You know, did the event displace affected households or communities? You know, did it destroy homes? Did it impact access? You know, when can people return to their homes and locations? You know, what do they expect to find when they return? And what's the likely impact on livelihoods and, you know, livelihoods and income? These are sort of, this lets you know sort of, you know, again, a flood, you know, will displace people for a period of time. You know, they may come back to a dirty home or a damaged home. An earthquake will displace people for a long period of time. They may not have a home to go back to. A drought, you know, doesn't displace people, it more or less displaces livelihoods. It may cause people to displace themselves if they can't make a living or live where they presently are. So understanding the event and the information around that lets us know what the impact, you know, of the event is going to be on the people that need to be served. You know, and then, you know, once the event occurs, you know, to begin any sort of disaster response, you know, you need to know the following, you know, basic information. How many people have been impacted? You know, what type of support do they need? And for how long will that support be required? Now, so depending on the type of disaster, you know, and the expected impact, the number of people exposed to those impacts, and the time it will take people to return to pre-event conditions, disaster managers can develop a resource requirement plan, and from that, a procurement and logistics plan. So this kind of basic information is really the key to starting the whole disaster response, emergency response system and process and action. And, you know, building on what Chris presented from the DisasterAWARE, you know, event and other new features, using that technology, being able to model impacts, you know, GIS, combining it with historical impact, you know, information and needs from past events. You know, this enables you to pretty much get a very rapid initial damage and needs assessment before you even set foot on the ground, just through this analytical model. And with that, an estimate of requirements, you know, you can produce that. And then that's, again, the key to the logistics and supply chain management part of the emergency response, being able to mobilize resources and mobilize actions. Now, you know, this initial algorithmic assessment, I like to call it, or this sort of data-based, you know, remote initial assessment, You know, it doesn't replace the on-site assessment. That will come later, but it's an excellent start point for responders to be able to just gauge the size and intensity and potential magnitude of the event and what they should expect to see when they do get on site. The ground level assessments, you know, further refine that. They confirm assumptions, you know, and then provide a more detailed assessment of damages, needs, and numbers of people affected. You know, but the benefit, you know, from that initial damage assessment, it allows disaster managers, and especially those that are involved in the sort of logistics, supply chain, and resource part of the operation, you know, to develop that resource requirement. You know, you see there's X number of people may have been impacted, you know, X number of people may have lost their homes, they may need temporary shelter, they will need water, they will need food for a period of time. And that allows you to start mapping out, you know, what is the resource requirement and what are you going to need to have, you know, to meet those requirements. It enables you then to look at your existing resources, what you have in hand. If you maintain stockpiles of relief items, you know, kitchen sets, sleeping mats, if you have sources of food, commodities, and things like that to draw on, it gets you to look at what might be the number of people requiring a certain amount of water, that if the system's been damaged, you know, the normal water system, where do you have to get it, truck it in, how are you going to deliver it and distribute it? It enables you to start that planning process right away, because these things do take time. Look at what you have in hand, compare that against what the resource requirements might be, and then let you know whether you have a gap or a deficit. And that would then trigger the procurement side of the house looking to get those resources, either purchase them from the commercial sector, ask, you know, partners, NGOs, you know, UN agencies, whatever, do they have resources that they can contribute, private sector, general public. So you'll see what you have in hand, match that against what the need is, and see whether there's a gap or not. And then if there is a gap, figure out how are you going to meet that gap. And as well, for the logistics and supply chain function, it's really important to you know, bear in mind that there's certain resources that are, I would class them as durables. They're one-off things like kitchen sets, tents, you know, shelter materials, sleeping mats, buckets, whatever. You know, these are things that people need for their basic maintenance and comfort. You give it to them one time and that's it, you know. And then there are requirements that people that are, I call it, put in the consumable class. That's food, water, hygiene supplies, and anything you expect people to use and use up, but that will need to be replenished. So week in, week out, and again, each disaster event is going to, you know, be different in terms of how long people will need support, external support from the response system, and how long, you know, when will it be that they can begin to get back to normal and take care of and meet their own basic needs themselves as they did pre-disaster. So depending on the type of the event, the number of people impacted, the type of impact, you know, that's going to also determine how long the system is going to need to provide support to people. One hopes that, you know, that support will begin to scale down over time as people begin to get back up on their feet and return home and are able to clean up and recover and, you know, get their lives back in order. But, you know, to be able to respond sufficiently and in a timely manner, you need a base of information. It can often take a long time to actually go out on the ground and collect all that information and assemble it, analyze it. You know, that's kind of the old school way. Again, that still needs to be done, but you can kick off and start the system and start the response by using the kind of information that's featured here in the PDC platform and in other platforms around, you know, by using data and information, being able to put it in through a system and model the impact of the disaster. And with that information, that should give you enough information to actually start the process of delivering relief supplies, while during that initial time, you then refine that initial assessment, you know, and based on ground level reality. But you don't show up on the disaster site with a blank piece of paper saying, gee, I wonder what happened. You have a good idea of what you should be seeing when you get out there, and you can already start the planning process. So we feel like that this is a real game-changing, you know, technology and technique. And we'd like to see more countries, more NDMOs, you know, in the ASEAN region, in the Indo-Pacific region, and around the world, using this kind of technology to be able to, you know, kickstart their responses, understand what requirements they need, be able to develop a plan to get, you know, to resource it. And if they can't resource it on their own, be able to quickly engage their partners in the international community, local private sector, and others, and engage them to get the resources that the people need, so that the best response possible can be put in place. So with that, I just want to say that this kind of information and this technology we find to be really interesting, important, and we'd like to, you know, continue to engage, you know, all of our partners, you know, and looking at better use of the information technology and the tools that we have out there today. Thanks a lot. And with that,
Yes.
I'll close.
Thank you, Harlan. I know that you said you have to take off and won't be joining us at the end, so I want to just use the opportunity to thank you. Good, excellent on point remarks. And did want to mention that of course this does not replace detailed disaster assessments, but what it's really designed to do, as you said, is make sure that you show up there with the most information that you can at the quickest time. Cute helper, by the way.
Sorry about that. You managed to open the door.
Oh, okay. But anyway, yeah, thanks so much.
And thank you. And again, my apologies to the rest of the group. If I could finish this next thing early, I'll chime back in towards the end. Thanks a lot.
Sounds good. Aloha. Well, with that, what I'd like to do is turn over the screen sharing, and hopefully more successfully than mine, but turn that over to Nicolas and have him share some of the work that the World Food Program is doing using DisasterAWARE and some of the data resources in there, and the collaboration that we've had with World Food Program and OCHA and PDC to develop something called JADE. And with that, Nicolas, please.
Thank you, Chris. Aloha and hi to everyone. So let me share my screen. And while I do that, I wanted to echo what Harlan was saying. There's no natural disaster. I even have a pin that says that. Are you seeing my screen? Yeah. Is it okay like this, or do I need to put it in full screen? Is it manageable?
Try putting it in full screen. Perhaps right. I'll let you know that we get a repeat of.
Here.
Oh, that looks better. Yeah, looks
right.
better. Okay, great.
Thanks, Chris. So I think it's a very good session, as a good segue to what was said before. In your intro, Chris, you mentioned the importance of partnership. And what Harlan was insisting on is getting the data as soon as possible. So at least we have something to work from in the next step after a disaster has hit. So it's exactly what we've done under this JADE product, which is the Joint Analysis of Disaster Exposure. It's a joint product that was initiated by PDC, UN, OCHA, and WFP. So As you know, information is key. And when a disaster strikes, this is what it looks like in terms of the information needs. The supplies is going down. We don't have the information anymore. And the demand is going high because we want to know how many people are infected, where are those people, where are the most vulnerable people among those affected. That's what we need, and we need that as soon as possible. So some of the agencies, and WFP is one of them, has started to work around what we call the 72-hour emergency assessment, which is shifting the effort and the load onto the data preparedness. So having all the data layers available to determine to the best possible, as early as possible, the potential impact of a hazard. And that's when you see the red light, which is when the hazard hits the disaster, and then we start to go with the initial assessment and the field verification. But that takes time, yet we can anticipate a lot of that with better preparedness, with better modeling. So we have at least in hands the government, the NDMOs, the partners, the best information, the best guesstimate of what that impact and where is it and how many people. So that's where we shifted by starting to work on a 72 hours approach. Now, agencies like UN OCHA, PDC, WFP were working in parallel on something similar to that 72 hours. So what happened is there was instances where we came in the aftermath of an event with different numbers, and that was not good. And so when we recognize the benefit of working together in solving this problem of not having just several numbers, but one agreed number, relying on the best of what we know and we have at hand to determine that impact. And so we came together under that JADE product. It's a unique collaboration of PDC, UN OCHA, and WFP with a very nice division of labor between the different organizations. First, we've seen it from Chris in his presentation. PDC has the AIMS model as the scientific impact modeling, and that's a product that keeps being developed. He mentioned now the 3.0, AIMS 3.0 that has a 30 meter by 30 meter resolution. That's amazing. And that gives you the impact modeling we need at the time of a disaster. WFP has years of experience working on vulnerability. What does it mean to be vulnerable to a particular hazard? My unit here from the regional office of WFP in Bangkok is called Vulnerability Assessment in my team. We've done vulnerability for years. We understand vulnerability. So we bring that as an additional layer to the impact model, not just to say, where are the people, how badly they're impacted, but where are among those the most vulnerable? So we can already target better the response and provide that information to the key stakeholders, the government, the NDMOs, the partner, the HCTs, other UN agencies. And obviously, UN OCHA is the coordinator, is the key convener, brings us all of that. And that's the JADE product that's being delivered right as early as possible, but to get that information that Harlan was talking about, getting that information as early as possible, as the best information possible at the right time. So how does it work? I've just mentioned it briefly. We rely on the AIM model. There's the hazard monitoring, the exposure analysis at a 30 meter resolution with the AIM 3.0. We couple that with the WFP vulnerability data that is already packaged in a way that that information can be ingested into the AIMS model and produce that additional vulnerability analysis. And by doing that, WFP looks at vulnerability. It's based on secondary data, the latest, most recent available vulnerability layers in each of the countries where we work. And we prepare that information, share that on HDX, so it's also available publicly, but it's packaged in a way with our PDC colleagues so it can be treated, analyzed, and as a layer into the JADE product. When there's an event, mostly we've been working with the PDC on a sudden onset and mostly in our region on cyclone, tropical storm. There's an event coming, it has reached a certain threshold in terms of severity, it's approaching, so it's early enough for us to be able to deliver a meaningful analysis before there is a change of path. It has happened where the storm changed, and so we rerun the analysis. But you know, as soon as the conditions are met, OCHA calls on what we call a JADE, you know, calls on us, the PDC, the WFP, to say, let's get that product. There's a demand from the in-country partners, let's deliver that and let's give that information at this time. So the people on the ground have that information available to them. And so what it does, it produces, based on the A model, you know, many different types of analytics, which is the number of people that are in the affected area, the number of people who are in the most affected area based on different agreed thresholds of severity. What do we mean by worst affected areas? From a tropical cyclone, is based on wind speed buffer zones, for example. And then we inject that vulnerability layer and to determine the most vulnerable people in the worst affected areas. And then we break that information down by different characteristic, age group, urban, rural population. We overlay with asset and structure that Chris was talking about, and have at a subnational level some of the breakdown of that information. So that's available in a already packaged template. So that's information, for example, that we shared to the HCT at the time of the Typhoon Goni in the Philippines back in October 2020. So that's information that's available as early as possible to the people on the ground. What are the benefits of that? First of all, when I mentioned the 72 hours WFP, it was quite ad hoc, it was quite manual. So now we've really created a systematic, as automated as possible approach that delivers that impact information. Ultimately, what we have is a mapping of most most vulnerable people in the most affected areas, and we come with one single number. So this is the number that's been shared and being discussed, and that's the basis for that discussion. As Harlan was saying, we have already something to work from to say which one are the areas that are likely to be most affected, how many of the most vulnerable people in those areas, the demographics of those people, so we can already government, UN together start to work out a response plan, understand the magnitude of the event, the emergency funds that will need to be allocated to the response. The benefit is we rely on PDCs, a model that keeps being updated. Now we are the version 3.0. So any new update, any new enhancement will be made available through that product. So it's very much here a win-win-win solution for everyone. There's still work in progress. JADE 3.0 that has been very recently released comes with new features, new elements. So we need to work again with the UN OCHA and PDC to finalize that new template to benefit from the enhancement and make sure that information is there available and it's the most useful information that's out there. We need to continue to improve the analytics. We're doing a lot of work around tropical storm based on the wind speed. There is interest to bring additional elements to that. For example, the rainfall that's associated with the storm, or in the context of an earthquake. For example, in Sulawesi, the tsunami, we did the analysis. So we need to bring more of the tsunami potential secondary impact to earthquake in the analysis. I mentioned it's been initiated by PDC, UN OCHA, and WFP, but there is certainly a lot of interest to bring other partners under this initiative. And for example, there's already advanced discussion with the ASEAN Center under the JADE product. And there's a lot of additional relevant partners that would certainly be able to contribute to this product. So this is something that's an active conversation that we have with PDC and our colleagues at UN OCHA. In Asia Pacific, obviously, but also beyond that. And as Chris was mentioning, PDC is PDC Global. So we're also looking at exploring some of the good practices, the element, the collaboration that we've put in place in the Asia Pacific to the benefits of additional other regions. Under 72 hours, many countries in the Asia Pacific have been trained under the 72 hours. So now we're looking at making sure that that JADE product that's available becomes that pre-event analysis. So it's what we call the version 0 of the 72 hours, to make sure that we have that product that's there and available as part of the 72 hours before we start to move with the, the ground validation, the additional needs assessment. And finally, talking about partnership, so we have a memorandum of understanding that's signed between WFP and PDC, and we are working to bring that collaboration to provide additional benefits to, to governments, to partners in the region, and so we continue to explore that, mobilize resources where we can to bring the best analysis, the best processes to country, and augment where capacities needs to be augmented. So it's very excellent collaboration that we're very keen to continue and expand, Chris and colleagues. So I think that was my last slide. Yes. So an overview of JADE, great product, great collaboration, and most of you have already seen that JADE product. So it will continue to be there, released, and only improved as we go along. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you so much, Nicolas, both for detailing your use of AIM and some of the other resources in DisasterAWARE, and how you and your colleagues and my colleagues have really turned that into an actionable piece of information. I also want to thank you for reinforcing the value of partnership and collaboration, and I think this is one where 1 + 1 equals more than 2, or in our case, I think it's 1 + 1 + 1, but it equals more than 3. So it's really an excellent example of getting organizations together, taking advantage of the core strengths and experiences of each to produce something that probably nobody could have done individually, but when you put it all together, really is a helpful product for our colleagues out there in disaster response. So thank you so much. With that, I would like to introduce and turn over the microphone and screen share to our colleague LA from the AHA Center. And LA is going to share with us some of the ways that the AHA Center is using their version of DisasterAWARE DMRS to help partners throughout the ASEAN region. So LA, thank you very much for joining us, and take it away, please. And nope, I was going to say you're muted. Now you're not. So I'm going to mute myself.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone, and greetings from Manila. Now I will be presenting how at the AHA Center we are utilizing information to support our operations, specifically during disasters within the region. Now, just to give everyone just some bit of background about the ASEAN region. The ASEAN region is considered as one of the most disaster-prone regions in the world. In fact, in the last 121 years, 1 in every 10 disasters caused by natural hazards actually occurred in Southeast Asia. And in the past 2 decades, we've experienced within our region some of the world-class or catastrophic disasters. In 2004, we've had the Indian Ocean tsunami, which impacted Indonesia, Malaysia, Myanmar, and Thailand. In 2008, we've had Cyclone Nargis in Myanmar. In 2013, we've had Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. And just recently, in 2018, we've had the Central Sulawesi earthquake in Indonesia. Now, these 4 catastrophic disasters, collectively, they resulted to at least 280,000 casualties and a combined economic damage cost amounting to at least $23 billion. Looking at the information that we have in the ASEAN Disaster Information Network, since July 2012 until last month, April 2021, we've recorded 2,710 disasters caused by natural hazards within the ASEAN region. Now, as we can see in this chart, a huge majority of the hazards which resulted to these disasters are actually hydrometeorological in nature. So we are seeing 60% of more than 2,700 disasters are actually caused by flooding, followed by wind and rain-induced landslides, as well as storms. And several portions are caused by geophysical hazards, such as earthquake, volcano, and related to earthquake, tsunami. Now, the thing about hydrometeorological hazards is these hazards can be forecasted with sufficient lead time, given the technologies, given the early warning technologies that we have. So this puts us in a good position to actually minimize the risk of these hazards. Looking at the data again from the ASEAN Disaster Information Network from 2012 up to March, end of March this year, we are actually seeing that there is an increasing trend in the number of disaster occurrences within the region. As we can see, the highest so far was recorded last year, 2020. We've recorded 530 disasters across the whole region in 2020. Now in 2021, just in the first quarter of 2021, we've already reached 328 disasters. This is already number 3 so far in our records. So 2021, amidst the current pandemic situation, is actually in a position to become the year with the most number of disasters since 2012, or since the inception of the AHA Center in 2011. Now, because there is actually an increasing number of disasters that we are experiencing within the region, there is a requirement, there is a need for an increased monitoring so that we could anticipate how we will be able to minimize risk and respond to these disasters if this will occur. This is where the ASEAN DMRS comes in. Now, the ASEAN DMRS, or the Disaster Monitoring and Response System, as mentioned by our colleagues from the PDC, is tailor-fit to the need of the ASEAN region. This is based on the DisasterAWARE platform of the PDC. 7 multi-hazard near real-time monitoring platform that we are using within the region. The good thing about this ASEAN DMRS, given that it is multi-hazard, there are a lot of hazards that we are monitoring. It is not just limited to natural hazards. So that is also very important, especially if we are deploying our staff on the ground to respond to disasters caused by natural hazards. Of course, we also have to know information about pandemic, for example, or safety and security. So this will inform us on how we plan to deploy our team on the ground. In addition, since this is also a near real-time platform, we get the right amount of information at the right time that we have to use this information to inform our decision making. Another good thing about the DMRS is, given that the AHA Center, while we are a small organization, we are covering a large area, a large geographic area within the region, which is also, as mentioned earlier, one of the disaster-prone areas in the world. So it is, of course, a very difficult task to 24/7 monitor all the natural hazards within the 10 countries of the ASEAN. And this is where the DMRS helps us. Through this technology, it helps us with its automated monitoring system. So in a way, DMRS is actually monitoring itself. Once it detects a hazard which is occurring within the region, it sends us what we call a flash alert, as you can see in the screen right now. So it will notify our disaster monitoring and analysis team that a certain hazard occurred in the region within a certain level. So we are looking at different levels of severity or potential severity of these hazards. So these are either a warning level, a watch level, information level, or advisory level. And these different levels of severity or potential severity of these hazards actually inform the different courses of actions that we undertake within the Center. Another important information that we are getting through the DMRS is, as mentioned earlier by Chris, this is what we call the hazard brief. So it is providing us an updated, updated figures on the potential exposures of our region coming out of these hazards. So there is an exposure on the population. Drill down, we can see how many are children, adults, and the elderly. There's also an information on the potential exposure to the economic or to the economy of the potentially affected. So all of this information, we package them. We provide some additional level of analysis and information products that we provide to the ASEAN member states and potentially assisting ASEAN member states. We call them the flash update, the one you are seeing right now on the left. So based on the information coming from the MRS, we couple it with the official information coming from the national disaster management organizations. And in addition, we also gather additional information from partners, NGOs, civil society organizations, and even the news. Altogether, we compile all of this information, create some form of analysis, and provide this to our stakeholders. Now, the flash update provides us with a quick snapshot of the hazard, its potential impact to the affected member state, the capacity to respond of the which are very important for the potentially assisting member states in case they want to fill in the gaps of the affected member state. Now, after we release a flash update, the next step is to actually monitor the hazard itself. Now, there are two ways in which the regional response is going to be activated. The first one is if the affected member state requests for assistance from the ASEAN, then we are going to activate our emergency operations center based in Jakarta and then provide the required support. The other way of activating the ASEAN regional support on ASEAN member state is if based on the analysis, we see that there is a potential gap that can be filled in by the ASEAN, we can actually offer assistance to the affected member states. And once the affected member states accept
LA, I think we just lost you, lost your audio feed.
validate and distribute what we call a situation update, the one you are seeing on the right. Now, the situation update is a more thorough information product that not just provides the overview of the situation in the country, it also itemizes the different steps the affected member state undertook to respond to the disaster, as well as the ASEAN response in support of the affected member state. In addition, we also provide some gaps that can be filled in, not just by the ASEAN member states, but as well as the different partners and stakeholders of the ASEAN region. And also, we provide some additional information on anticipated risks. For example, the one which happened in Philippines in November last year, the Super Typhoon Goni, we also monitor different weather disturbances that might impact the Philippines after Super Typhoon Goni. Because of course, if there is a huge typhoon that impacted the country, and then there's another coming in, then it might exacerbate the experiences and the impact of the Super Typhoon experienced by, of course, the population. Now, all of this information, this is how we utilize all of this information to inform our operations here in the ASEAN region. And for the past almost 10 years of the AHA Center, we've responded to 36 disasters since 2012 until the latest one was in January 2021. We've responded to most of this are natural hazards, response to disasters, which is within the mandate of the AHA Center. But in certain cases as well, we are requested by ASEAN member states to support them to respond to non-natural hazards such as pandemic and conflict. And that's it for the AHA Center. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, LA. That was
Back to you, Chris.
an impressive amount of information. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Just another excellent example of how you've taken that platform and you've customized it to the region and to your mission and to your requirements, and are using it to support the NDMOs across the region. So thank you very much for sharing that. Our last speaker is going to provide a little different perspective, I think, than our first three panelists, rather. Bambang, he's going to share with us how the BNPB and their national EOC, their PUSDALOPS, uses INAWARE, which is an Indonesian national version of DisasterAWARE. Bambang, would you like me to attempt to display the PowerPoint? I think hopefully a little bit better this time, but would you like me to display the PowerPoint file?
Okay,
or do you
sure.
plan to?
Sure, Chris.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so let me get that queued up. I hope this works a little bit better.
Yeah, I can see that.
There we go. Let me just see if this works. Is that working, audience?
Yeah.
Okay,
great.
excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Allow me to greet Ms. Adelina and also Harlan. Is still here. And also from our colleagues for representative from Asian countries and also outside this region, and also from humanitarian NGO in this HELiX forum. Good morning. As already mentioned by our colleague from our center, Mr. Hale, so he already mentioned that there must be Indonesia is one of the most high risk or disaster-prone area in this region. So according to our data, last year 2020, there is around 2,900 disaster event in Indonesia. So if we divide it in every day, there will be 10 disaster happen every day. And if you see this map, the length of this area of Indonesia is equal to the mainland of the US, around 10,000 kilometers wide, which it consists of 13,000 islands in Indonesia. So if there is a disaster happen, so we can imagine that there will be some difficulties to reach that area as fast as we can, because the area is islands and some of them is still forest. So we need this platform. INAWARE is from technical aspect and also from the functionality. Maybe it's already explained by Chris, and also some of them are also explained by LA. It is almost the same. So in Indonesia, we use this platform. We call it the INAWARE platform to monitor the disaster. We try to use this as updated data information from field. So if there is a disaster, so we want all from provincial disaster management organization and also from the municipality or city level. They have to report the disaster every day or whatever the disaster. Next, please. Yeah, until now, we use this ASEAN in 3 levels. First, in national level, we use the ASEAN to monitoring disasters and also monitoring the potentially earth phenomena that might be can cause a disaster. And also now we also use this to train about the disaster management with the ASEAN. And also fortunately we also already have the e-learning for the ASEAN, so we can easily to give training to all officers in the DMO, in the provincial or city level. And also in BPBD or in the provincial disaster management offices, and also in city level, they already use this ASEAN to monitor, to add the disaster product like photo, videos, and document and text as report. So you know, because of the so many disasters happen, so this ASEAN also is very good and very helpful for us to archive disaster, including the details. So if we want to know what happened in last year, how many floods happened, and where are they, how many because of high precipitation, on how many because of high tide, we can see easily, because all disaster is already posted in ASEAN. Next. Yeah, until now we already have more than 1,500 users. So from BNPB, BBBD, and other institutions. Indonesia is consists of 34 provinces and 514 city level. So, and also including the related agency. Until now, we are not yet use this ASEAN to be used by the communities or public, because we want the management of disasters is not interfered by any information from hoax, from some kind like that. So we want this information that put it in the system is the originally it is come up from the report from the officers that responsible in the disaster. Next. Until now, we also try to integrate all the systems related to disaster in all aspects, in all phases of disaster, from disaster preparedness, mitigation, and emergency response, and also rehabilitation, reconstruction phases. So we try to add, or we try to connect the system with whatever they have. For example, they have the API system, they have maybe the direct connection with the database and server to servers. So we want every information related to disaster in all aspects will be integrated in the one map, in the one platform. So including the satellite information, from meteorological, geological, from search and rescue, from the volcano monitoring agencies, from the fire and forest, and also health, and including the transportation agencies, and also with all of provincial disaster management system, or with the city government. So if every institution in this country is already integrate, so it will be easily for us to monitor everything in one dashboard. Next. So we hope in the next generation, we will have also the automatic early warning analysis. So with this analysis, so in the future, they will be separated between the system for the official disaster management, including the related agency, and also from the public side. So if there is any warning, so we want everyone to have in their hand the warning, and then make them to more easily to respond in the warning, to move to the safer place. And also, we hope that in this year, we're going to have a program that's funded by the World Bank to make the early warning system that will be connect with all sensors and all system that we already have in Indonesia. We call it, the program is Indonesian Disaster Resilience Initiative Project, and how to make more higher preparedness in the community. So people at risk will be more safer. And also, we want to connect also with the disaster management response in the field. If there is a, for example, if there is a forest fire, so the precipitation activities will be easily to control, easily to move. BNPB, until now we have 56 helicopters, and including the fixed wing to do the water bombing. So it's easier for us to deploy all the resources. And also disaster management report, which include the map of disaster location, IDP location, command post, logistic, resources, and also status, and also post-disaster report, or we can more easily to know about the development of the houses and development of IDP scam and others. Okay, I think that's all from me, Chris. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pa Bambang. I want to point out a couple of comments that you made, or information that you shared, that does reflect a sort of national versus regional perspective, and that's the fact that it's being used in a number of the provinces and districts. So it's really multi-level, national and subnational. Also, that you've done a really good job of bringing in all of the key government of Indonesia stakeholders. You know, you mentioned BMKG, LAPAN, the space ministry, the volcano PVMBG, Volcano Institute, Ministry of Forest and Environment and Forests, and so forth. So I think those efforts that you made really do tie in the key stakeholders, the key science and information generating agencies in Indonesia. And lastly, I think you made a really interesting observation that it's not just about taking this information to respond. Of course, that's primarily why the system's developed, but it serves as an archive. So the information that is collected, it's there and it stays there indefinitely. So LA talked about the DMRS since 2012, for example, and PDC has run EMOPS even longer, almost 20 years. So we have that history. We can look at patterns. We can look at impacts based on events that were similar in nature. Hey, what happened when typhoon such and such struck the Philippines? I think this one is going to be similar. Let's pull up some of that information. So there's really a wealth of knowledge and information that's created and archived and able to be retrieved, not archived just to save it, archived to use it. So thank you for making those points. I know we've run a little bit longer with our panelists than we intended. Part of that was the technical challenges that I had. I'm very sorry for that. And I think we got off to a little bit of a late start. But that said, we've got time to answer some questions. I haven't been looking in the chat, but I think our colleague, Mary, will share some questions that have been posed, and we can do our best to answer them. Mary, were you or Victoria going to relay any of the questions that were?
One question from Presley George.
Okay.
How much COVID-19 affect the disaster preparedness, and what are the main adjustments we need to address?
Probably I'll ask Bambang to make some comments on that, since he and maybe LA as well at the regional level. My observation is that it impacted it in a number of different ways. With the National Disaster Management Offices. One, their staff faced the same and maybe elevated levels of risk that the population did. Eventually, in Indonesia and in the Philippines, those EOCs had to partially shut down. All of a sudden, you almost by definition, you lose capability and capacity when that happens. It certainly also focused the attention of the staff on responding to that. I know it depleted stockpiles at hospitals and clinics and so forth. So I think if one were to draw a curve of capability and capacity over time, it would have gone down over the course of the year. But can I ask any of our panelists, Bambang, perhaps from a national perspective, and then I'll ask others to join in on what impact COVID had in terms of disaster preparedness, and what adjustments need to be made or maybe have been made by your organizations.
Yeah. COVID is something is new for us to handle, but we learn from other country. Until now, Indonesia is can also press or hold the number of cases. Until now, we have 1,700,000 positivity number, which means it is still lower than some fellow countries like, for example, like India and Spain and others, which is the positive number is quite higher every day. So now we also handle this and monitor all the city, all the provincial level with the index of positivity rate index in some province. So if there is there will be 4 colors: green, yellow, orange, and red. which means if it is higher, so we will monitor very tight with that area, and also deploy the resources. And also we also ask the military, police to also handle this COVID in all provinces, which is the very high impact in handling this COVID is how to change the habit between before they are not interested to use the mask, and how they can use the mask, how they can wash their hand, and how can they manage the distance between one another. And there will be then there is no crowd in that area, including where we have very high season. In the few days ago, Idul Fitri, they are usually every year they have movement. Now we have the regulation. There is no movement, almost zero movement outside the logistic, energy, and officer movement. For public, there will be a very limited. So that's why we also. For some province, they already input the data in also in ASEAN, so we can monitor directly. But now we also have a system, a platform that monitor those, and then we also grab the information from the hospitals to know faster how many people that already infected or positive, and also connect with the laboratorium, and also with the community health clinics, so we can easy to monitor in the very micro area, for example in the villages area, or even in the sub-villages area. So and then there will be a special treatment if the area is getting red or higher positivity rate in that area. So that's what we are doing.
Thank you, Pa Bambang. Can I ask if any of my other co-panelists, any additional comments? LA, Nicolas.
Yeah, Chris,
Harlan,
can I comment? Just
please.
Two comments. Yeah, I think it's a very good question. I think reflecting on some of the work we've done from WFP perspective, and the exact work we've been doing when we're dealing with a typhoon or other hazard is understanding vulnerability. And I think COVID-19 has pushed us to rethink vulnerability. So the vulnerability layers we have for a typhoon, what are those vulnerability layers related to COVID? We know about the health impact, but what about the impact of COVID on food security from a WFP perspective, but also the impact on livelihood, when we know the impact of COVID on income loss, on issues of remittance and things like this. So one of the things is COVID has very much pushed us to apply the same approach as we have done for typhoon, overlaying a health hazard over a vulnerability layer, again, to determine which ones are the areas most impacted, not just by the health impact, but also the secondary impact on food security and livelihood, and who are those most vulnerable to that impact. And the second point, I think it has pushed us also to think multi-hazard, realizing that we're dealing with typhoons, we're dealing with earthquake, we're dealing with drought, but we're dealing also with a new hazard, the health hazard. It's not going to go away. So can we think, because a lot of the analysis, a lot of the approaches are very similar, can we think more multi-hazard in the way we're dealing with COVID in addition to the rest? Because it's COVID on top of what LA showed us, the typhoons, the other events. So think multi-hazard. Over.
Chris, can I add on to the discussion?
Yeah, please, LA. Please do so.
Sure. Just 3 points from myself. Number one, looking at the numbers, while we are actually seeing that there is an increasing trend in the number of cases within the ASEAN region, looking at the numbers, the ASEAN region collectively consists of about 2% of the global tally. Number two, the more obvious impact of COVID-19 towards disaster management within the ASEAN region is there is an added stress to the resources of the national disaster management organizations, be it on the human resources, be it on their financial resources, be it on their capacity to respond. There's also an added complication to disaster management, as mentioned already by Nicolas. That's why we have to think multi-hazard. Look at how the different disaster management organizations changed their protocols in terms of the management of the displaced population in view of COVID-19, where in view of natural hazards and then vis-a-vis COVID-19. Also, there's also some changes on how relief are being packaged and delivered to the affected individuals. Now, in terms of how the NDMOs or the ASEAN region responded to this added complication caused by COVID-19, we actually saw that there is a huge increase in the digitalization of services, not just within the ASEAN region, but within the countries themselves. And third point, this is a very good question. And among others, we are also asking this question within the ASEAN Center and within the ASEAN region. That is why we actually chose pandemic, not just COVID-19, but pandemic in general. We can also include COVID-19. That is why we chose this topic to be part of the ARMOR or the ASEAN Risk Monitor and Disaster Management Review that we are going to release at the end of 2021. So the ARMOR is the annual publication of the ASEAN Center. So I would like to now invite everyone to wait for the publication of the ARMOR, which is focusing on pandemic in general. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you very much. All good points, LA and Nicolas. I wasn't able to find the mute button quickly enough, but yeah, you both made some excellent points. I know we're just a minute or two over, but and I see there was one question posed about how long before COVID-19 is contained, and I think that's probably a tricky question that none of us really know the answer to. But before maybe weighing into that, let me just ask, are there any other questions or any other comments that the audience would like to make, or my colleague, Victoria, Anam, Melin, I think you're on the line as well. Any comments? Otherwise, maybe somebody would like to take a, oh, I see, okay, one question was just posed. More examples on how cities, local governments can use DisasterAWARE platform and input their own vulnerability and coping capacity. Let me start answering that, and then again, if there were other comments, I think you can maybe raise your hand, and the moderator will recognize you. Oh, was somebody speaking? No, maybe not. So yes, we have a number of different countries and regions, subnational regions, especially in the US, for example. We have states and large cities that are using DisasterAWARE as noted here. You can, in fact, incorporate you can bring data into DisasterAWARE. Not so much, I think, as envisioned here right now, but you can bring in your own layers, you can track your own assets. The hazard brief is really based on vulnerability and exposure data from PDC, from partners like World Food Program and OCHA and Humanitarian OpenStreetMap and others. So we don't necessarily allow you to bring your own data as a user into the system to compute vulnerability or exposure or impact. Although in our customized system, like with UNAWARE, that's certainly planned. So that an operator of a system, AHA Center could customize, or BNPB could customize their version of UNAWARE to bring in their own critical lifelines and critical infrastructure and lifeline data and so forth. We do certainly have a lot of cities and countries and agencies around the world that are bringing in their own map layer. That's map layers, so they can actually generate graphics that show the combination or intersection of a hazard with equipment and facilities that they're interested in, and track their assets and receive alerts. So yeah, many customized examples. With that, let me ask if there are other comments. Mary, are we able to bring in other comments if people would like to make those? So we're not.
No more questions or comments.
No more questions. Okay. Well, maybe with that, since we're already about 5 minutes over the session length, let me at least express my appreciation and gratitude for our panelists. I think we're really fortunate to have participants like Harlan from USAID, Nicolas from World Food Program, LA from the AHA Center, and Bambang from BNPB. Extremely knowledgeable experience and brought a wealth of that to our panel. Want to thank the AHA Center and others for helping to organize the event as a whole. I think it's great to see how we can if people are digitalizing services, we're consumers of that, and we're participants in that as well. As much as I would have loved to have been in Jakarta under different circumstances and meeting with all of you and having the same session and then perhaps adjourning to lunch or later to dinner, there is certainly a convenience factor with being able to talk to you from Hawaii and be able to, have my normal work schedule tomorrow and you have your normal activities tomorrow as well. So I'm sure we'll see more and more of this. I know at some point we will get back to traveling and we'll get back to seeing each other in person, and that's going to be wonderful as well. But in the meantime, great that we can share ideas and experiences in such a convenient mechanism. So I'm going to say terima kasih, mahalo, and aloha, and turn it back over to you, Mary, our host.
Chris, sorry,
Oh.
Mary, before you, can I just ask if people could turn on their cameras so we can just take a quick photo?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it'd be nice if we could see everybody's smiling faces. Aloha, Oliver. Aloha, Lena, I see you now.
I'll just give everyone a couple of minutes.
Yeah, if you've got a camera, turn it on. Oh, don't be shy.
Okay, we have a couple of pages, so I'll just keep smiling. Okay. I'll scroll through. Okay, so 3, 2, 1.
Thank you.
Do the next page. 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna sign off. Again, appreciate everybody's participation and enthusiasm.
Thank you, Grace, Victoria.
So before we really close the session, we would really appreciate if you can fill in our survey feedbacks. I will be pasting the link on the chat box now.
Thank you very much.
Once again.
That's a survey, is that right, Mary?
Yes, the feedback on the session.
Oh, feedback. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, and please join me for the iPitch competition this afternoon. We have a live competition with 8 finalists, and I'm going to be one of the judges. I'm still confused on who should be selected as the winner, but it's going to be interesting. So join us for the iPitch this afternoon and the closing. And mahalo PDC, thank you all the speakers. Thank you, terima kasih, selamat. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye,
Bye,
Adelina.
everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Everyone, take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.